Oh, what's going on, everybody out there? Welcome to the PHLY Sixers podcast as we discuss a new name that we have to talk about with the possibility of maybe checking in on this guy in the offseason with all of the wing talk. This is a name that could possibly come up into discussion quite a bit this offseason, along with Derek Bodner and Kyle Neubeck. I'm Devon Givens. Brianna is here producing all of you in the chat. It's great to be with you as always. And hanging out here on this great Wednesday to talk about one other wing by the name of Brandon Ingram because, well, listen, when we're trying to get through all of these names, everybody seems to be on one side of the Paul George conversation. Then there are others on the Jimmy Butler side of the conversation. Well, let's mix in a few other names because they're not the only two. You still have to trade for Jimmy Butler. You have to max out Paul George, and you can find other ways because, as we know, with Daryl Morey speaking on Monday, that you don't just have to acquire a player with all the cap space that they have available to them only in free agency. So we look at Brandon Ingram right now, and at his age, 26, right?
Age 27 in September.
27 in September. Let's take a look at some of Brandon Ingram's numbers for the regular season and the postseason. So Brandon Ingram on the regular season here at the moment. Well, we look at what he did. He's always one of these guys that you know can score coming out of Duke and coming into the league with L.A., traded to New Orleans.
Postseason numbers.
The regular season numbers first. We start with 20.8 points per game. Not bad. You know he can score the basketball. He was all-star 2 seasons ago. He will grab some rebounds at 5.7 boards a game, 5.1 assists, shooting close to 50% from the field, 35.5 from three, so just under the league average. But you know, he can knock a few down from time to time. The issue is when you do get to the postseason in the 4 games. He did have a play-in situation. Also, the postseason matchup that he had there in the first round where it was pretty lopsided, let's be honest. Zion played not every game, so he wasn't available either. Way below his season average of 14 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 34% from the field, and 25 from three, where he only puts up 2 3-pointers in those games in the postseason.
Lou Dort stole his lunch. Absolutely,
it's not good. So we have to get into the conversation of Brandon Ingram. That being said,
I do it because we're focusing on the playoff numbers early. He did have a run 2 years ago where he averaged 27 and had pretty good efficiency.
6
so
games.
he has had some
Shot
moments.
40-something% from three. Yeah,
49% or 48% from the field.
I also want to preface this by saying we're not just pulling Brandon Ingram's name out of the ether, right? For anybody who might have missed it, I believe it was last Friday, day after the season ended for the Sixers. Brian Windhorst at ESPN was on, I think it was Get Up.
Yes.
Named Paul George as priority target number 1. He is a free agent, so that makes it easy to say he's the guy versus all these people maybe you trade for. Behind them and the potential trade targets were Jimmy Butler and Brandon Ingram. And he did, Ingram did feel not like an afterthought, but certainly further down that pecking order. But I think the reason I wanted to talk about him while we're bringing up Paul George and LeBron and Jimmy and all these other guys is he does represent something different than them because, frankly, he is younger. He is not a 34, 35-year-old guy at the end of his rope. He's someone who is also, in my view, a buy low candidate. Like his value right now coming off of that playoff series, given the potential fit concerns with Zion and the problems they've run into team building in New Orleans, it's someone that, hey, if you strike out on priority options, maybe this ends up being the guy you can steal and say, okay, we'll give him a prove-it chance and we'll see what happens this season. So that's how I want to preface it. I know we have one big Ingram detractor on the set right now. If you would like to please not literally stand up, but
pass the baton over to him.
Pass the baton to Mr. Draft Express on the end there.
So let me just throw a question back at you. What does he do at an elite level? There is one answer.
Score.
It's tough shot making.
He's an elite mid-range shooter.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that is the archetype that I have the least amount of interest in. He doesn't get to the free throw line a ton. His three-point volume has gone down. Like he had his first 2 years, in New Orleans, he was shooting like 6 per game at 38, 39%.
Yes.
Over the last 3 years, it's like 3.5 per game at like 35%. That's not good enough. He takes a lot of time to get into his sets. He's an okay but not great passer. He doesn't get the free throw line a ton. Yada, yada, yada. If a lot of people will call him like skinny Tobias Harris. And look, I think he's better than Tobias.
I think that's unfair.
It's unfair. And I think his age will, or his game will age better than Tobias because he has such a high release point. I think that shot is always going to be a weapon. I think that mid-range game is always going to be a weapon. And while he's not a great initiator, he's better than Tobias. But man, just a guy who is going to live in the mid-range, take a long time to get there. He's going to need to dominate the ball to do so. Not a great off-ball player. He's an okay but not great defender. Just like if I start looking at the options they have on the wings, Paul George, Jimmy Butler, I think impact winning at a much higher level right now. And I think they probably will next year and maybe over the next 2 years. To me, if you have an argument for Brandon Ingram, it's because he is 26, because he could be a long-term core member. Maybe you believe in him being a second option next to Tyrese Maxey. And I just don't. I don't think he's good enough to be a number 2 option that drives winning. And more to the point, that next contract, I think, could be Zach LaVine levels bad. He has 1 year and $36 million left on his current deal. I think he's going to get a very big payday. There are already reports that he's looking for an extension. I want almost no parts of that extension. So if the selling point for Brandon Ingram is he has a longer runway than Jimmy Butler or Paul George, I don't believe in that runway. I don't really want to be in a long-term Brandon Ingram business. So give me the 2 guys who are going to impact winning more over the next 2 years. That's why I have very little interest in Brandon Ingram. Like I said, I think a lot of people will just look at the age and go, okay, that's a lot more appealing to me. But that next contract I don't think is appealing at all.
So I'll stay on the negative front with you for the time being, because I do want to talk about the other side in a second, but it's important that we are realistic about who Brandon Ingram is. Mm-hmm. Somebody, and I wish I remembered who it was. It might have been Nekias Duncan, one of the big general NBA podcasters or writers, said this recently. I wholeheartedly believe in this, that the difference between Brandon Ingram and some of the high-level shot makers and creators in the league, and the example was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander can hit tough shots. He doesn't necessarily need to hit tough shots.
Yes.
Whereas Brandon Ingram, both because he settles for bad shots and because, as Derek said, the ancillary skills are not at like the top end of the spectrum, there are a lot of possessions where the best look Brandon Ingram can or will get is a pull-up mid-range jumper from around the free throw line. And that has made it problematic in New Orleans, where they're trying to build around Zion Williamson, who pretty much, I wouldn't say ignores the three-point line, but does not want to shoot threes. His strengths are all free throw lining in, trying to attack the basket, trying to get downhill. And I think the most discouraging thing for me about Ingram is that as Zion has, become who he is, at least when he's healthy, and it's become clear what you need to do to play around Zion, he has actually gone the other way. Like he went from, as Derek said, a guy who's taken 6 threes a game to somebody who this season has taken 3.8, and that is in Tobias Harris type category.
Players don't normally come to Philly and shoot more outside of Tyrese Maxey. Big exception.
Yeah, and so you don't want to end up, the way I would compare him to Tobias is you don't want to end up in a situation where Joel Embiid is operating from the elbows, posting up on the left block, drawing the double team, the swing pass comes to Brandon Ingram, and he steps out of it and steps into a mid-range jumper. Now, if he uses that to attack the basket, score at the rim, get to the free throw line, all that stuff, that would be great. He's also not a super high volume free throw shooter. I believe he's around 5 per game for his career. And so those are real downsides. I do think there are certainly traits that he has that separate him from Tobias. I do think he looks to pass more. I think he can be a more creative passer out of pick and rolls, out of dribble handoffs, things of that nature. But the pace at which he plays, certainly not up-tempo, run the floor, spread it out, take advantage of his length against other. It's a very slow and methodical style. And I do think pairing him with Joel relies somewhat on Joel adjusting more to him than the other way around. Like, I think in some ways you need Joel to become more of that constant floor spacer. Like, we saw him take a lot of threes at the end of the season, in part because of the knee and the limits with his mobility. You would probably encourage Joel to shoot more so you can get Brandon Ingram touches in his, comfort areas, quote unquote. But when you're making the best player on the team adjust to the third banana rather than the other way around, to Derek's point, that is pretty problematic to me. And so I get all the downside stuff. He has not been, I'd say the last couple of years specifically have been disappointing. And the fact that he hasn't seemed able or willing, we don't know which, to adjust to a team that is more Zion-centric than previously, that's a bad sign to me.
So with how he plays, and we bring the comparison up with Tobias Harris and where he is out there on the floor, if I were to stay on the positive side and I look at what Brandon Ingram does, well, let me start with the negative part. He disappears too much within the flow of the offense. He just does. Even watching him with Team USA, sometimes you can get a sense of how guys play with different players. And at one point, he was benched towards the end of their medal run. And it was puzzling because you thought, and he was starting, but you thought that he was one of their better players, where it was just confusing as to why it wasn't working for him, where obviously Anthony Edwards took over and it became Anthony Edwards' team. We all knew that. Then you had the Brunson piece and the Tyrese Halliburton coming off the bench, Mikal playing in the starting role there, Cam Johnson getting minutes as well. But the Brandon Ingram piece there, it was like, this is interesting. Why is this not happening? Or he's just going to come out and just blow torch through the rest of the league because he's ticked off that Steve Kerr is not giving him any minutes. That did not happen this season. He did average 20. He had his games. Looked like he was on a good run where close to the All-Star break where he was in discussion for that again, which would have been his second All-Star berth. But he disappears too much. And then seeing him in the postseason and how that whole thing played out, it was very puzzling because when Zion did go down, it was more featured of C.J. McCollum, of course, and then we got to get Trey Murphy going a little bit more because he is going to be part of the future with what they do. And it simply wasn't working with Brandon Ingram out there on the floor. So those are the negatives. He just disappears too much. And even in some of the comments, you see folks talking about he's too lazy. He's too nonchalant. He's not aggressive enough.
Nonchalant is a great word to describe how he plays.
So when you go to the Tobias Harris part, though, and let's say he is in that same role as that third guy, second to Tyrese Maxey, of course, Embiid, everything hovers around him. The difference that I do with his nonchalant personality is I don't think he'll be hesitant to attack the way that Tobias Harris did. The three-point shots the three-point shots may not fire up as much as you want, but the one thing that we would always get on Tobias Harris too, if he didn't take them, is he would settle for something. Not just settling for a mid-range jumper just to settle because we were afraid he might not make it. At least the Brandon Ingram piece is he might knock that down at a pretty good clip. He might attack the basket and try to dunk on somebody because he has the ability to, because he's not afraid. I'm not going to say he's fearless, but again, he's not afraid to do that. So with it, I look at that piece and say that is more encouraging with him taking over in that Harris role and not just being a guy standing in the corner and getting lost in just the mid-range part.
If the bar is I trust him more than Tobias Harris, then yes, I agree with that. I'm aiming a little higher than that, though.
Well, yeah, we're replacing him with that spot right there, just like you're replacing him with the Paul George and Jimmy Butler in that spot also.
Yeah. If we get to the point where, like, Jimmy and Paul, people like that, people who I do actually think impact winning more significantly than Ingram are gone.
I don't disagree
and they're not an
with
option.
that. Yeah.
That's when I start turning to, all right, let's see what kind of role players we can get. Because I think Brandon Ingram, for as talented as he is, his impact on winning, it's more than a role player, but it's not as close to a star as it should be. And I think, like I said, if it was just like, hey, acquire him for a 1-year rental at $36 million, I'd have more interest in that. The next contract, I have no interest in because I think somebody is going to pay him to be a star for an above average at best starter level production. And that's where I'm out.
Well,
I have a question, but we'll do that in the next segment with the Brandon Ingram piece.
Yeah. I still have I have positive takes on Ingram that I do want to offer, or at least on Brandon Ingram's market.
Sure.
Also got some positive takes on our good friends at Shady Rays. Guys, Shady Rays, will prepare you for the season ahead with quality shades that are built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break the bank. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company offering a world-class product rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Durable frames, crystal clear optics, they are the perfect choice for all outdoor adventures. And there are hundreds of options to choose from, so you're bound to find the perfect pair to match your style. I wear Shady Rays quite often. I have a pair actually in the car downstairs below the offices here at PHLY. I wear them while I'm driving. I'll bring them to the beach. I've brought them on vacation. They're very versatile.
You know some people. Can you give me a pair?
Well, I'll have my people talk to their people.
Okay.
We'll talk to your people.
Okay,
and
cool.
We'll go through the whole chain of command. I know that, listen, we got a big stack of Shady Rays that showed up at the offices, and all the vultures were circling.
I wasn't here.
Might have taken a few pairs. Not pointing any fingers, not making any accusations, but they did go fairly quickly. But here's the good news, guys. If you lose your Shady Rays or they take an unexpected hit, don't sweat it. They have the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair is backed by lost or broken replacements. If you don't love your shades, you can exchange for a new pair or return worry-free within 30 days. No risk when you shop with Shady Rays. Their team always has your back with personal and fast support. So exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out the best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com and use code PHLY for 35% off of polarized sunglasses. Guys, that's a great deal as someone who's bought plenty of polarized sunglasses before, and these ones work great. So try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people.
We also want to make sure we tell you about Rite Aid. For once, it is not about me and my stuffed up nose. We are off of that. I'm not off of the sickness entirely, but we're off of that read right now because we want to tell you about vaccines. Protect yourself and your family by staying up to date on your immunizations. Rite Aid pharmacists are specially trained, certified immunizers. Did you know that most vaccines are no cost with insurance or through government plans like Medicare Part D? If you're unsure of what vaccines you need, get a personalized recommendation from a Rite Aid pharmacist. And if you have questions about vaccines, stop in and ask a Rite Aid pharmacist. Book a vaccine appointment today. You can schedule for yourself or for your whole family at riteaid.com/schedule. State, age, and health restrictions may apply. Ask a Rite Aid pharmacist for details. Rite Aid pharmacists can vaccinate for COVID-19, shingles, pneumonia, tetanus, whooping cough, chickenpox, and more. Select Rite Aid stores have a dedicated pharmacist ready to administer vaccines and answer all of your questions. If you have questions on what immunizations you need, if you're not sure if you're up to date, or if you're feeling nervous to ask questions, a Rite Aid pharmacist will take the time to make personalized recommendations based on your health history and discuss any concerns. No questions are too small. Just walk in or schedule an appointment Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. State, age, and health restrictions may apply. Ask a Rite Aid pharmacist for details.
All right. So circling back on, I don't even know if I'd count this on the positive side, but for part of the package of, why do you consider Brandon Ingram while he has the negatives that we bring up? One, I think because we and a lot of other people look at Brandon Ingram this way, and because of how his season ended, and we have had people in the chat rightfully point out he was dealing with some injury issues toward the end of the year that could explain some of the playoff struggles. I think Brandon Ingram is probably gettable for a reasonable price. If we're just talking about trades, I'm not willing to give him the extension. My approach to trading for Brandon Ingram would be, okay, you're coming here and you're going to have, this will be your contract year, big performance year for you. The outgoing cost would reflect that. I don't know what that would be, like this year's first and maybe one other thing. But I'm not making a Godfather offer. I'm not paying a premium to get Ingram. I'm saying to New Orleans, look, we know he is not a priority in your developmental future. He does not work with Zion Williamson to the degree that you want him to. You want to give more minutes and more opportunities to the Trey Murphys, to the Herb Jones, like all these other guys that just need to get on the floor and frankly deserve to get on the floor in a lot of cases. So give them to us. He's at a, $36 million, I believe. Just over $36 million for this season. That compared to Paul George's 49 or 50 for him or Jimmy Butler gives you more cap space to work with in terms of whether you want to make another follow-up trade to get another guy under contract, if you want to pay more money to potential free agents on the role player side. And that gives you some more options rather than once you sign a Paul George or once you trade for Jimmy Butler, the walls start closing in. And so Ingram, to me, represents at least some sort of middle ground. Whether that's the reality, I'm not sure. But I do know, on top of the fit and all the other stuff, the Pelicans are not a franchise that pays the luxury tax, and they're going to be counting every single dollar as they head into this summer. And I think Ingram is more than likely going to be a casualty of that. So I think you're probably going to be able to get him at a much lower cost than some of these other options that we're talking about.
He did play 64 games last season, and when we talk about Butler playing 50. Paul George played a decent amount as well for the Clippers, but he also missed his fair share. Of course, that factors into it with the youth and the availability that we speak of, and that's what makes him such an intriguing prospect. So, Derek, I did want to ask you this. He's had some trouble
playing, as many games as he needs to historically, too. He typically always misses 20 or so games every year, and no real.
So in this one, he missed 18.
No real devastating injuries that I can remember. I think last year he only played like half the season. I don't remember what the issue was, but most of it has been, he's a slender guy. So that build, you're going to take a lot of bumps and bruises throughout the year.
So what I wanted to ask you, though, was, Derek, what would it look like, though, with an Embiid, Maxey pairing with those guys, playing it out? Not great, of course, as you laid out some of the negatives, but what could that look like on the positive side with him in that lineup, with the way that Nick Nurse likes to play, his skill set, what he adds to the Sixers, what he could add to the Sixers with those two in particular?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I see a player as hesitant to attempt to catch and shoot shot like that and who struggles to get all the way to the rim like that, I just don't think it's going to be all that pretty. I do think he could help a little bit in the non-Embiid minutes because he is a pretty good pick-and-roll playmaker. He does have some passing. It's not necessarily the passing that I enjoy. It's a little bit ball-stoppery passing where he needs to take his time. He needs to probe. He's not really making the connective pass, but he might be able to see over a defense and make the skip pass to a shooter, which has value. It's just not, I think, especially when you're talking about a third option, I would like a more quick decision-maker, connective passer type. I don't think it's a great fit, and I think that's part of the problem. I agree with Kyle that I don't think it'll be too cost prohibitive to acquire. I worry much more about the long-term cost of the contract than I do about what it would take to acquire him. If he had spent the last couple of years next to Zion going from like 6 threes per game to 8 threes per game, being a willing and confident
even just maintaining the 6 threes per game,
but just being a confident somebody who, when his ball is swung to, I have confidence will pull the trigger on that. I would have more, and if I thought you could get him at like an actual third option salary going forward, I would have more interest, but I think the fit's pretty poor. I think the shooting is a concern. I think the ball stopping is a concern. I think the contract is a huge concern. And like I said, his selling card to me is that he's 26, but if I am too concerned about the future and that contract to buy into the long term anyway, then I just don't really see why he would be near the top of my list. Now, am I saying he wouldn't make the team better? No, he'd make the team better. It's just, to me, I think there are going to be other avenues that I will want to go.
I think I'd have an easier time of it really banging the table for him if I had more confidence in one of two things. The defense, which has been just all over the place, to put it lightly, or his ability to do the stuff we saw Kelly do a lot last year, which is the slashing, the cutting, and all that, but he's also just not super active as an off-ball player. And so some of that, frankly, comes down to, and I don't know this. I don't know Brandon Ingram. I've never really talked to him or his people or anything like that. But how much of that comes down to coaching and how he's being used versus this is how Brandon Ingram wants to play? And could you sell Brandon Ingram as Nick Nurse and as the organization on becoming that more active off-ball guy? My guess, given that he's 26, about to be 27 years old, going into a contract season, is no, right? Like, this is not generally the time of guys' careers, especially when they're already making $36 million. They've been rewarded for who they are and the skill set they have, It's not the time that you have the light bulb moment, like, oh, I need to play a different way. I need to show up there and be a completely different version of the guy that I've been my whole life.
And especially when you're going into a contract year, you're going to do what you're comfortable with, what you're familiar with. He's going to lean back on the habits that have gotten him to his point, not completely change. If it was like the first year of the next contract, maybe you could, even then, when you're 27 years old or so, it's hard to really change. We did see Kelly successfully do it a little bit, but he had to be humbled before he did that. When you're coming into a contract year, I wouldn't bank on that.
Yeah, and look, like I say all this, and we say all this. He's a very talented guy, right? Like he's got a bunch of different.
About him. Right.
He wouldn't even be in this mix where Brian Windhorst brings him up with Paul George, Jimmy Butler, and him if he was not someone with a level of intrigue. Like even a bad year last year is him scoring 21 points a game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. It's just the fact that like it never, for me, it's either he's having an incredible game, or I'm forgetting that he's there for 2/3 of the game, and that's the complaint we've had with Tobias, right? Like I think Ingram is a better rebounder than guys have had on this team in some ways. He's a better passer than some guys on this team.
But he's not good.
He's not great, and I think to Derek's point, the only way you could spin it with the passing stuff is that maybe if you bring him here, he's the guy who plays as the dude with bench units. You just let him like how Doc tried to do it, where it was instead of staggering the stars, it was we have James and Joel, or we have Joel and Ben, and then an all bench group. I think you could put Ingram in that spot. And then his ability as a pick and roll guy, as someone who can see over the top, as someone who can make shots from mid range, like that becomes more valuable. And then you just try to destroy the Tyrese and Joel minutes as they're attached at the hip together. But that's, I wish I was more encouraged by him. I wish I had more belief in him, turning a new leaf or kind of seeing what the holes in his game are and trying to be part of a more like caring. I don't want to say caring about winning because I don't think he doesn't care about winning. But I think he has been relatively inflexible with how he's played. And I don't think that's something that just changes overnight, not at this point in his career.
It may not. In the way that he plays. And the one thing that whenever we talk about these players coming in and playing next to Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey now, but more so the Joel Embiid piece is, has he ever played with a guy like that? Zion is totally different. He was traded when LeBron got to LA, so that was totally different. They were rebuilding that LA situation. How do you play off of Joel Embiid on the floor? Can you be effective next to him where you don't have to work as hard? You don't have to put so much energy into it. And can you adjust to those things, the cutting back baseline, cutting middle of the floor? If things are doubled on the strong side, he's on the weak side again. I think he can attack that one-on-one closeout and have some success. But I've also seen it where he is hesitant to get the jump shot off like the guys are talking about. So the talent is undeniable that it's there, and that's where the frustrating part comes in because he's so talented, you expect so much from him. And let's be clear, too, for me, I'll speak for myself, he is way above the Tobias Harris part. So I don't want that to be confused at all. As when Derek said, if we're just talking about just that one step, he's a few steps above Tobias Harris. But that mentality is a big part of why it maybe doesn't translate with the way that they want. Zion has missed a number of games with the New Orleans Pelicans where he is the one that you lean on to take over, and it's his team going forward. And there have been too many examples with those times that were missed for Zion that he didn't do it enough. And he didn't do it enough where you rubber stamp it, where they're looking to keep him, and instead of trading him potentially to get Trey Murphy on the floor, who they maybe see obviously younger, the contract may be a little bit different, but the flexibility there, it may not be enough. I like him enough where he frustrates me when I'm watching him from afar and saying, what's going on? Where's Brandon Ingram? And then he goes off and says, oh, that's why you like Brandon Ingram, because he just hung 35 on the number one defense in the NBA, and it looked easy because
when he's rolling, he's so big and long that release point, you can't get to it. And so those difficult shots are like it's you could play good defense. It just doesn't matter. He can wipe away good defense. And that is a legitimate important thing, especially when we're talking about getting to the playoffs, right? When all the defenses you're facing are going to take away plan 1, plan 2, plan 3, and you have to figure out counters and fallback options and all that. But again, I circle back to that whole idea, right, of like his fallback plan is what should be guys like, or his normal plan is what should be guys like 7th plan on a given possession. And there's just way too much of that. So he's frustrating in a lot of ways because you can see the talent, right? Like you can see why he was such a high draft pick. And there have been these stretches of, he'll go for a few weeks in a season where it's like, man, he's kicking some fucking ass, right? And then Zion comes back and you have the team that is supposed to be built around Zion. And it's like, well, these guys it's like they're in a band and they're playing 2 different songs at the same time. Like there's never that. And that doesn't mean that's all on Ingram, right? Like some of that is on Zion and Zion having this kind of narrow skill set for who he is and what he wants to be. But given that Zion is the dude, there needs to be some level of, I don't want to say awareness because I'm sure Brandon Ingram knows what it's like playing with Zion more than certainly I do. But there has to be, like we've said with Tyrese Maxey, right? There's that concerted awareness and effort to, okay, this isn't working for me, or I'm playing off of this person. I need to get in the lab, get in these 2-a-day, 3-a-day workouts in the summer, and add this specific thing to my skill set. Brandon Ingram has become a better version of the guy that he was when he entered the league, but I'm not sure he's that much different. He's just a higher volume guy. Like the playmaking is probably the thing from rookie year to now that has picked up the most, and I do give him credit for the strides he's taken there, but the scoring stuff I'd say is largely very similar.
And the one fear, too, is when Derek brought up the contract piece, guys playing their way, making sure you lock in that season to get your contract. The fear is that he plays so well that you don't know him enough right now for us to talk about this in a positive way, that he keeps it going. But there is that fear that you get that long-term contract and you kind of take that step back from what got you that deal in the first place. And that is a scary thing, even at his age where he'll be 27 and then the following season when he would potentially sign that long-term deal, he'll be 28. Still, it's scary if he's not playing through it. We got a lot to get to still with the conversation here, but I want to tell you about our good people as this episode is brought to you by the BetParx app. And right now, as we're doing the show, sorry guys, I have been paying attention, but I'm also monitoring what's going on with the baseball team because they have been on a 7-game winning streak. Currently, right now, they're trailing 4-1 in the game, and the potential that this is going to be snapped tonight. But if you feel good about your squad, that they can come back trailing Toronto right now, having Thursday off, get back at it on the road on Friday, that they can come back. Right now, the money line is at -2,000 for Toronto. But if you have faith in Philadelphia to come back and win this game, it's currently at +900 to come back and win. How does that happen? Well, I mean, the bats got to get hot. Got to look to some of those guys that you can count on that are your star players within the lineup that are going to turn things around for this particular game. And if you want to place a bet, the money is in the moments. Win big with all-day action with BetParx Sportsbook app. Win your first $10 bet and earn $125 in sports bonus bets. You play for fun. You love to win. You bet. But that's not it. Not just baseball. You can also pivot over to the playoffs tonight. Game 2 of New York and Indiana in the Eastern Conference semifinals there. Indiana trying to even it up before they head back to Indianapolis for
Can't
games 3 and 4.
wait to tune in and watch those refs.
As we talk about BetParx. And if you're feeling good about Indiana or maybe New York taking a 2-0 lead, BetParx is the place for you. Right now, download the app and play along with us. I already have it here on my phone. Must be 21 or older. Please gamble responsibly. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER.
We also have some, I feel like we talk about the Die Hard program quite a bit, right? But we've been pumping out Die Hard content throughout the playoffs. We'll have plenty of stuff coming out in the near future. Mr. Numbers Man over there, as we were talking about yesterday.
Might be some spreadsheets and some diehard articles soon.
Might be some diehard articles coming from Derek. I'll be diving deeper into, guys like Ingram, Paul George, Jimmy Butler, so on and so forth. We also have plenty of talented colleagues on the Eagles, Phillies, Flyers, Union on their respective beats. We'll get into it. Diehard program gets you access to all the exclusive content we pump out, but also access to our Discord, where we regularly talk to people in the chat will tell you about all these different topics, as well as, music, movies, video games, all kinds of other stuff. It's a very organized setup in Discord. You get a free shirt every year. We've got lots of new stuff that has come out over the last few months, including that new Maximus shirt that came out at a very unfortunate time right before the season ended.
Got to push it to Game 7, Tyrese.
Come on, Tyrese. Expected better from you. So there's that. What else am I forgetting? There's discounts on events, which, by the way, we do have a Phillies event I believe it's in Manayunk coming up. Is that later this week?
Yes, Friday
I believe.
At Manayunk Brewing Company.
So if you want to pop through there.
Live show and watch party.
Check out our Phillies gang if you're in Manayunk or nearby to Manayunk. Want to stop through? You might find me there. You never know.
Might find me there.
Yeah, look at that. So, yeah, the Die Hard program is great. Highly recommend it. And we all work very hard to make it worth your dollar, is what I would say.
Yeah, and they're giving away 2 pairs of tickets to lucky winners at the PHLY Phillies show, again, on Friday at Manayunk Brewing Company for that live show and watch party. Also, our good people from Olipop will be there joining. Cavs Catering. So, yeah, good stuff. Cavs Catering is fantastic, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, should be pretty good. All right, and make sure you sign up because Derek's going to write all the positive things about Brandon Ingram and how he fits into the Sixers.
Don't make promises you can't keep.
I mean, look, I think the kind of players that I will push back on more are the ones who are viewed as a star by a lot of fans and a lot of analysts, and I just don't think are worth that, in part because you end up overpaying both in a trade and an opportunity and in contract, and Ingram, to me, is a prototype of that. Do I think he's a bad player? No. Do I think he's untalented? No, obviously not. He's what Kyle said. The talented ones who don't produce enough are the ones that frustrate you the most, and I think he falls into that bucket. Right contract, right role, Brandon Ingram can help winning, but he's not a star-level player. He's going to be paid like one. It's going to cost you quite a bit to acquire him, and they're just players who I think are going to, like I said, either go for one of the older ones who will impact winning more over the next few years, or go for a more of a role player type approach. I think both of them have a chance to get you closer to a championship than Brandon Ingram does. So again, useful player, talented player, but I don't think he's going to end up being worth what he's going to cost. And like I said, a lot of that is both opportunity and contract.
I'm getting a real kick out of our guy, Phil W., the #1 Kelly Oubre fan on earth, being like, nah, I'm good on Ingram.
He has too many
negatives. That's a plot twist. Phil, listen,
yeah.
I give you credit for you're drawing your line. I don't know why you're a big Kelly guy and not an Ingram guy. They are very different players in a lot of ways. But I would say they fit in kind of that same general box of like talented but frustrating. So Phil's got his guy and he sticks to it.
Like I've said before, and I've said this, and I don't draw the comparison to Tobias too much because I do agree there are some differences and he is a high-end version of Tobias. But higher. Yeah. But still a version. Like there's only so high that anyway. A lot of the all-in-one stats. I think
is high referring to anything else here, or are you trying to make any suggestions?
A lot of the all-in-one stats. I think a lot of people like to put people in like lists and rank them and use them a little too literally. They're not useful for that. But a lot of times they will be like, hey, this guy has good counting stats, but all of his all-in-one metrics tend to suck. Whether that's BPM, VORP, EPM, win shares, whatever. And all of the all-in-one metrics for Ingram tell you he's kind of just an above-average player. So I think what you use those for is to dive in and say, all right, well, why do all of them rate him so lowly? And that's when you start finding some of the flaws. Like I said, getting to the rim, getting the free throw line, the connective passing, the volume shooting. It's just, there are deficiencies that limit what he is versus what he could be.
Yeah.
And when I'm talking about a final piece to go in on, like I said, there's just options I think are going to impact winning more over the short term. And I don't buy into Ingram on the long term, so I just don't really see the appeal. Like I said, I get the age, but I only get the age if I want to buy into him on the next contract, and I'm just not.
Well, There it is, folks. Brandon Ingram. Out.
I would also say this,
Out.
too. As much as we're talking about, Derek was the first one to say the phrase runway today. How much does a long runway really matter for this? If as long as we're living in the reality where Joel Embiid is the best player on this team and they're trying to win while he is still that guy or close to that guy, or until Tyrese is good enough that he can just, shove Joel into a defensive player in the year type role and take over the scoring load. Until or unless that happens, you are trying to win now. You're not trying to, maybe when Brandon Ingram's 30 and Joel Embiid is 33 or 34, whatever it is, well, now they still have a chance. I don't know, man. I think I would probably prefer get the guys who are good and are producing and are giving you a chance to win a title right now rather than hoping, hey, maybe in 2 years this guy might iron out the inconsistencies with his game. Because, by the way, if we're talking about trade candidates, once you get to, the McHales, for example, of the world, McHale certainly is.
I failed you, Derek. I'm sorry.
You did. You really did.
McHale certainly
hired for one reason.
has holes in, as the number one option. We saw that in Brooklyn this year, right? But as a guy who is, number 3-ish territory, he has already shown I can be that guy. I can fit into that role. I want to do the things that a guy in that role needs to do, right? Like doing the off-ball cutting, being a consistent catch-and-shoot player, just playing defense, taking the top assignment on the other teams. And so he's going to cost way more than Brandon Ingram in a trade for that reason, also because he's on a good contract for who he is as a player.
One more year left, baby.
But that's why it's hard to, like, if you want to go younger, but like go for it. Like get a guy who you can win with right now, but also fits into, whatever the long-term vision of the team and the franchise is. That's all.
Now, age-wise, they're right there together.
Yeah.
Kale is the same age as Brandon Ingram, so not much difference there. But to your point, he has shown where he can play different roles for your team and still be very, very helpful, successful with what he does out there on the floor. So, of course, but when you do look at the Brandon Ingram piece there and talk about, well, all right, he's 27 and all. What if you do get that 27? That 27 season or 25 season where he goes to the All-Star game and he's that player. We don't know because we haven't seen it in the last couple of seasons. But what if you do, to your point of you're trying to win right now? He does come in here and he gives you that contract year, yes, I know, and you get that deal. But what if he is that player that does show up for this team and change the scenery, likes this situation better, and it works out for him?
But how? Like
I don't know that. That's why I say, what if only because we've seen it.
Yeah.
It's not like it isn't in there.
But it's not like he's going to get the ball more by coming to a team with Joe and Maxey. And for the most part, his year-to-year efficiency, will he? I mean, it's not like they didn't have any shot creators over there. His year-to-year efficiency is pretty similar. He gets more points when he has higher usage, for the most part. He's not going to get a higher usage here. No, look, if he was a comfortable catch-and-shoot player, yes, he will get more catch-and-shoot opportunities. I can buy into that. Mm-hmm. I just don't trust him as a catch-and-shoot player. So, like, is there a possibility? I guess, but I'm not banking on it. It's all what you will. Do
you view that similarly to what like people brought up? And we talked about this at the deadline with DeMar DeRozan, where if he shot more, you would be the age is totally different, but just the type of player with the slashing, mid-range stuff, not enough 3-point value.
Yeah, I mean, look, Brandon will shoot more than DeMar from the perimeter, but I also think DeMar is a better passer as well and a shot creator. No, they're both the kind of archetypes that I wouldn't necessarily love next to. No, well, it's not even that don't want; it's that I don't want next to Joel Embiid.
If
that's all that matters, though.
If he had just
it's a big part of it. Yeah.
That's what matters.
If he had just stayed at that 6+ threes a game territory over the last however many years, I would have so much more confidence in him as a building block piece, right? And on top of that, when his volume was high, the efficiency was good too. I think he was like a 39, 38 40% shooter on, that's pretty good volume. It's not elite volume. It's not where Paul George is at, where he's at like 8+ or 8 per game, right? But if he's in that range, that's a huge difference from 3.6, 3.8 to 6+. That's a big jump. That's a couple of threes a game. That swings a lot of different games in the math battle, let alone just, how it spaces the floor for Joel and for everybody else. So maybe you could convince yourself that that's it. But I think to Derek's point, you don't really want to be in the maybe you can convince yourself camp with a guy who's going to be a foundational piece. It was a question that needed
to be asked. Got to throw those hypotheticals out there when we're talking about this stuff. Kane, settle down in there. I saw that, what you said about Ingram way better. Settle down. Settle down.
What do you say? I block Kane.
Once
he starts telling me that I don't watch basketball, I don't need to interact with
Ingram
him.
was better than Kale is. Settle down.
No, he's not. Stop.
Settle down.
Especially not as a third option on this team.
Especially as you are extensions of my family now. We always got to back him.
Family business.
Family business first.
Also, Mikhail's just a better basketball player.
Thank you.
Just flat out.
All right, I feel like 45 minutes on Brandon Ingram, we could probably move on.
It was necessary. Yeah? It was necessary. You want to get to that Jimmy stuff?
The other piece
Jimmy.
I wanted to bring up today is this is a report from, is it Barry Jackson? Yeah, who does he?
Wasn't like Florida Sports?
Well, I know his at. He's at the Miami Herald.
Herald.
So he covers all the South Florida teams. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to say this in the nicest way possible. He last summer during the Dame Lillard sweepstakes, I'm not sure if anybody has ever been more clear in how they were reporting a story. I'm just going to say it like that. How he talked about the Heat's position on trading for Dame and the foregone conclusion that it was, and so on and so forth. No shade, and it is what it is. So, laying the backdrop there, he reported this week, quote, even if the 76ers offered their 3 available first-round picks and 3 first-round pick swaps, it seems unlikely that would entice Miami, which loathes the idea of trading all-star caliber players for draft picks. Now, I believe on top of that, he did say that you could use that stuff to then, reroute it, that if it was a multi-team trade.
Shockingly, the aggregators did not help him out.
So there's a little bit of context missing there. However, if you are telling me the cost of getting Jimmy, whether the picks are going to Miami or going to Cleveland for Donovan Mitchell or wherever, and Butler is coming to Philly, if the outgoing cost is 3 firsts and 3 pick swaps, you can go to fucking hell. Right. That is not happening in this lifetime. It is not happening in another version or another part of the multiverse. I can't speak for the Sixers. There is a 0.000% chance I would ever do that deal for 35-year-old Jimmy Butler, who then wants an extension on top of that.
So without getting into too long of a rant about the local media, because I have some strong opinions on that, but we will push that aside. This particular reporter is a pretty good example of that, though. Like I said in the Discord earlier this afternoon, to me, the biggest thing isn't what it would take or what Miami wouldn't be interested in. The biggest indication is that we are a couple days after Miami season, and they're already putting out propaganda to try to influence the trade market. That is a bigger indication of Jimmy Butler's availability than anything. Yeah. Like I said, they will shoot everything down right now because they're trying to gain a little bit of leverage. But the fact that they're basically telling Daryl Morey, like, hey, you've got to get a third team involved, indicates that Jimmy Butler, there's a real chance he will be available. That's the biggest takeaway, more so than the propaganda.
Pat Riley's up there fucking talking shit.
Blow torches, man. Blow torches. And it's not going to cost that much, of course. But if that's the number, if that's what it takes, then absolutely not. At his age, the game's missed. Sure, he shows up in the playoffs, but no. That's just too much. That's insane. But again, and that's what makes this so fun and interesting to talk about. I'm seeing in here people Jay, our buddy Jimmy with 3 fire emojis in there for Jimmy. Then you have Ramid, no on Jimmy or LeBron.
That just sounded like Joe Budden. No!
That's what he was talking about for Drake?
Okay.
Right.
He just has a certain inflection of how he says no that you just reminded me of.
But it's so up in the air on the Jimmy Butler, Paul George, now Brandon Ingram conversation that there'll be so much. If only it was as simple as, you take Trey Murphy back instead of Brandon Ingram. But
listen, buddy,
that's not happening.
I would
that would be fantastic
to me. And I know we were talking about guys want to win now with and blah blah blah. If for whatever reason you could get a guy like Trey Murphy, a real volume shooter, an athlete, a guy who he's not like the greatest self-creator in the world, but he can definitely
put the ball
attack
on the
close
floor.
out, you put it on the floor, get to the rim and score.
And he's young.
Yeah, he's what, 23, 24, somewhere in that range. Somebody like that's available. I'm banging down the door in New Orleans. I'm sitting there eating beignets for a couple weeks, just like staking it out and trying to see what the hell's going on down there. But yeah, like look, I think to me Butler's price should probably be in that similar territory as Ingram, right? Like probably one good asset, maybe a second like decent but not great one, or maybe just 2 decent ones. Beyond that, I'm not like the guy's old. Well, I shouldn't say old. He's old for NBA standards, right? He wants a max deal or a max extension coming out of this that the Heat will have nothing to do with. It's completely dependent on his next team to try to give him that. And he's going to more than likely, if he gets moved, force his way to the team that he knows he is getting that from. With that backdrop, I'm not going to pay, an insane cost just to get him on the team. Like Miami showed you the blueprint the other direction, right? They just waited and Jimmy was like, well, I'm going to Miami and you got Josh Richardson back, right? Like we're not going to have a sweepstakes over Jimmy Butler.
Right. No, not at all.
Well, that's part of it too. They just don't have the leverage to be turning down deals like that. Like you mentioned, if it actually came to that and the Sixers did throw a Godfather offer like that, which would be absolutely insane, they would take it because they can then use that to flip for the next star. Obviously, they want to contend now, but you can use those assets to contend now. That is leverage and nothing more.
Yeah.
Yeah. And real fast, I've seen Derek all week having to tell people no on the Miles situation from Charlotte with him now
Miles
being
Bridges.
unrestricted free agent.
Not related to Mikal Bridges.
No.
To be clear.
I'll do it again. No!
Yes. Because I've seen it in the past where they've been confused and I've been highly upset. They are not the same person. They are not one and the same. They are
not
totally
even close
different.
to the same person.
Totally. I'm talking about person. And that's, you don't know to Miles. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. All right. Last night, OKC take that 1-game lead over Dallas.
Listen, boy, they look good.
They look good. They look good. And they had days off because they won so quickly. They look good.
Yeah.
Isaiah Joe getting some minutes there, Derek.
Don't do that to me.
I had to, man.
Don't
Derek's
do that
boy.
to me.
That's his guy.
Thinking about you, man.
After watching a shooter flame out in the playoffs, man, it would be nice to have one that can stay on the court.
It's amazing that he just seamlessly fits right in there.
Well, in part because he's such an off-ball threat. Like, he moves off-ball so well and gets his feet set so quickly that he's a threat the entire 24 seconds of the shot clock. And I think he's actually an underrated defender. I think he holds up. There's very rare that I look at him and I go, you have to get him off the floor. He holds up better than most shooters, especially most shooters that weigh about $170. He's turned himself into a really useful player.
I remember after his really good preseason run, and he was really pushing. Korkmaz was still kind of in the mix, and some of the other guys. And talking to Doc Rivers, and he's like, yeah, he's really good. Gave him like 5 games in the regular season.
Really good, but I'm never going to play yet.
And then he gave him 5 games coming off the preseason, and then he was done. He was done.
You just reminded me of this. Here's a fun Neubeck family story for all our wonderful listeners today. So my parents went on vacation once when when I was a kid, right? And I had a family member watching us. So of course the parents go away. You're like, I'm gonna have some friends over, because when it's like your uncle, your aunt, whoever,
good times, a little lenient.
They're trying to be the cool family member, so you can mess around, be loud, whatever. And my dad had a neon I think it was Moosehead, some kind of beer neon sign in our basement. And my buddy threw a ball that breaks this neon, right? And so obviously having to break the news to my dad is like devastating. I'm like scared shitless. No way I'm going to tell my dad this. So eventually I tell him like who did it, how it happened, whatever. And my friend, whose name I won't repeat it, my dad mentioned him in passing conversation after that. He goes, he's a nice kid. He just never allowed in my fucking house again. And you just like triggered that.
With the Isaiah Joe. With
the Doc Rivers like, I really like him as a player. I'm just never going to play him.
Nah,
that's exactly what that triggered in my head.
Yeah, I'm happy for him that he landed on his feet.
Yeah, good for him.
Making $2 million or something, and he's going to get a nice contract.
Good for that organization, man. Like, you want to talk about a team that got to see through the process to the end. Sam Hinkie walked so Sam Presti could fly for the second time. He certainly built a contender once already.
Good young players on that team.
I mean, think about Josh Giddey was I think the only guy with a negative plus minus last night. You're talking about bringing guys off the bench like Wiggins and Joe, and you got the core three. I'd say of Shea, Jalen Williams, Chet in the starting lineup. Like, they just have these interchangeable athletes coming in and out.
Casey
Wallace has been really good as a rookie. Like, they stole him.
I didn't realize how good defensively he really was until he got to the league.
So, I mean, look, they have built that where – and here's the thing I keep saying. I know – and they probably will make some form of consolidation trade. There's just no way they can draft all the players that they would have to draft in order to, burn through all these picks.
No way they can pay all of them when they get off their rookie contracts.
Right, but so that's kind of where I'm at, right? And I'm certainly not the only person with this position. I think as they get into these tough decisions with some of these guys moving forward, they're just going to wave and say goodbye. Like, they have not been an organization that's a luxury tax team. Now, this will be their second, contender or contention adjacent type team. But we saw it with the Serge Ibaka trade and the James Harden trade. They made very real decisions based on what they were willing to pay as an organization. So I think eventually a lot of these role players and whatnot are just they're out of here. Sam Presti's going to use these picks. He's going to reload, and you just hope that you're going to try to keep Shea and Chet and probably Jalen Williams. But I would say he would be the one who, if one gets away, or you're like, you have the three, you say that's probably the guy who he goes for the payday elsewhere.
Yeah, he's going to get the payday to have his own team.
Yeah. So, and then you try to keep reloading and iterating around the other two. And listen, credit to Sam Presti, man. They look awesome. And for as young as they are, man, they've been a machine in the playoffs. So kudos to those guys.
Yeah, that's a fun team to watch. It's looking like Minnesota. How many days they have off? Like 3 days?
They don't play till Friday, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. So Minnesota up 2-0. Oklahoma City. Could we see an OKC Minnesota Western Conference Finals? That would be fun. That would be really fun.
Adam Silver is probably if you want to go real conspiracy corner, Adam Silver's like, if we're getting OKC Minnesota, the fucking Knicks got to make the conference finals.
Knicks Boston, baby.
We can't do Indiana in the conference finals.
Knicks Boston, baby. And one last one before we say our goodbyes.
I will love it. Just to be clear, I don't care where they're from. These teams are awesome.
Good is good. Yeah. Good is good. But I see people still bring up Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby, Derek. So you want to lay it on the people and let them know that probably unlikely, especially with both teams making it to the semifinals and then one that's going to advance to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, look, they didn't trade for them to let them walk. Yeah. It's almost as simple as that. They knew what their contracts were going to be. In fact, I think, OG's agent is the son of Leon Rose, I think it is. You can guess Leon probably knew what OG is going to want in the summer. Pascal, too, they've had a lot of success with him. I don't expect them to be there. Would I have interest? Sure. And Pascal's not a seamless fit. There's obviously the whole Nick Nurse dynamic there as well. Yeah. Me personally, that dynamic he never gotten a shouting match with me, so I'm fine with that. But I don't think they're really available.
Yep. So everybody move on from the OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam camp. They're staying most likely where they are. We're staying in this spot, 2:30. Monday through Friday.
I'm going to get up and leave. I'll just come back.
We're going to leave now.
I'll be like Kendrick Lamar and sleep in the studio, buddy. I'm
Dedication.
battle ready.
If you can turn another show in less than 24 hours, that'd be great, like Kendrick Lamar. But we'll be here 2:30 every day.
No,
you got to think about it.
You can't be dropping pedo bars over there.
No, the part before then was what I was going to get at, just to get you laughing.
Gene brought up the low numbers about Josh Giddey there in the chat since we brought him up. So there you go. He and Drake something. There you go. Let's say goodbye to everybody.
I'm going to say somebody posted again, all this is alleged, but somebody posted a Photoshop of the old show, Drake and Josh, with Drake and Josh Giddey's face. I'll let you guys, add it up there. And anyway,
fun show.
A lot of people to thank here today. Got to shout out our girl Winona.
What up, Nona?
What's up to Winona? What's up to Martian Lynch, Bill Morris, Kareem Williams, X-Man, Dave Walrus, Daryl Morey's Yams. I can't believe I have to say that on the show.
What up, Walrus?
Malone John, Barry Green, Ron, Jay, Kane, the Bull RJ, Kane, who's now blocked by Derek, by the way.
Big Daddy Kane.
Public enemy number one, Monty Marr, Eugene G. Ross. What up, Eugene?
What up, Gene?
Coach Lowell,
Coach,
Ricketts.
what happening?
Phil W. number one, Kelly Oubre, superfan in the building.
You got to drive him, chauffeur him next year.
Joseph Goldstein, Alex McCoy, Remo K. I want to say my guy Will and my guy Gavin were in here at one point. If they were not, I still love y'all. Liam Stevens. Yeah, here we go. There's Gavin right there toward the end. Phi Chi, Ed Wright, Sean DeSouza. I believe there was a Kyle Graybush. Got to make sure you shout out.
I saw that in there.
Another Kyle.
What up, Kyle?
Another Kyle.
We've got enough Kyles
in the building. Listen, I said to Kyle Lowry in the locker room after the final game of the season, it's like a Highlander thing, right? There can be only one. Thank you, everyone who is here today. If you have not already,
Al? Saw you in there.
Did I not say Al?
I saw him in there
the 2-minute
earlier.
warning.
And Kyle Gray, Manscaped. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, my God. If you have not already, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you can get notifications each and every time we go live. If you hit the thumbs up button today for us, for me, for the gang, for super producer Bree, I'm not sure what's going to happen.
What up, Bree?
Maybe Brandon Ingram will turn into a completely different player and change the fortunes of the Sixers franchise.
I don't know.
Or maybe not.
Or maybe Devon will finally be successful and accomplish his job.
But it does not hurt to hit the thumbs up button. It always helps us. It makes me feel good inside. So please do so. We will be back.
Yes.
As always, from now until the end of the offseason, 2:30 on Thursday.
Some hoops.
See you then.
We all silly like the mayor.